The month of January is famously regarded as the worst month for movie releases. That trend continues to be true less than a week into 2024 with the release of Night Swim, easily one of the worst horror films released in recent memory. So why is January the month that we see releases like this? And have there ever been any good January releases? Let's find out. January is often regarded as the dump month, not only among regular moviegoers, but even casual audiences that might only go to the theater every once in a while tend to know that the early months of the year are pretty weak for movies. You would think that studios would want to start off each new year strong with at least decent films, but that tends to not be the case. Studios are very strategic about when they release each movie and try to put them out around a time when they think they'll attract the biggest audiences. That's why we usually see the real big moneymaker films come out during the spring and summer when school's out and people tend to have a little bit more free time, and then the award season type films come out later in the year, closer to when they'll be voted on for the different award shows. Also, a lot of family-oriented films come out around Thanksgiving and Christmas because this is when families are spending a lot of time together and looking for things to do. The earlier months of the year, however, is when people don't have as much money after spending it during the holidays, the kids go back to school, and the adults have to go back to work. There's just not as much free time to go to the movies, and most people don't want to spend any more money. Even though this is the case, studios still need to put out movies, so what better movies to release when the theaters are dead than the ones that either perform poorly during test screenings or that the studios just didn't really expect to perform very well in the box office. Hence why January is often called the dump month. So what are some of the famously bad January movies? As mentioned in the intro, 2024 kicked off real strong in the bad movie category with Night Swim, a film based off a short from 2014 that definitely should have stayed a short. I have no doubt that early screenings of this film didn't do well, and the director himself even said he didn't plan on it ever becoming a feature-length film.
So this was a short film.
Yes.
And now you have the bigger canvas as a feature. So how was that?
I mean, I didn't even try to expand it from a short into a feature until I knew that there was a big enough of an idea to justify it.
The good news for Night Swim is maybe it will at least be remembered for something, because a lot of the bad releases have become well known in their own ways. Take Meet the Spartans, for example. Originally released on January 25th of 2008, it has a 25% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 9 on Metacritic. But despite this, it made $84.6 million against a $30 million budget. To this day, I still hear people say quotes from this movie and often reference scenes from it like the Pit of Death scene.
This is Sparta!
My lord, he will tell Xerxes that Sparta is not for them, so whatever you do, don't kick him into the pit of death. Stop kicking people into the pit of death.
Even as bad as this movie is, people still get a lot of enjoyment out of it. In 2013, one of the most controversial and often referred to as one of the worst movies of all time was released to the world. Movie 43 is a film made up of a collection of comedy sketches and was called things like The Citizen Kane of Awful and a black mark on the careers of everyone involved. Even with such negative reviews, the film itself has become sort of a cult classic. There's a lot of fascination with how the film even got made in the first place, and how A-list actors such as Emma Stone, Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, and Chris Pratt got talked into starring in it. The whole story of how movie 43 got made could be an entire video on its own, but basically the quick answer is they were essentially blackmailed and tricked into it. Even with all the negativity surrounding the film, it's been pretty successful in its own right. The list of bad early in the year releases goes on, with films like One Missed Call, Bride Wars, Epic Movie, and Alone in the Dark. If you've ever seen any of these films or other bad January releases, then you definitely understand why the early part of the year has such a bad reputation for movies. But is it possible for a good movie to be released during this time? Since so many bad movies release early in the year, you would think that if a good one came out during this time, that it would shine through and draw in audiences. This is definitely true from time to time. Sometimes studios also do wider releases of films during January that they're hoping will win some awards. Take American Sniper from 2014, for example. It had a limited release on December 25th of 2014 and then expanded to more theaters in January of 2015. This allowed it to qualify for the Academy Awards awards because it came out before the deadline of December 31st, and then it really stood out when it hit more theaters among the bad January releases. It still holds the record for the biggest January box office release by making $90 million during the first weekend of it hitting more theaters. Other films like Gran Torino, Lone Survivor, The Revenant, Hidden Figures, and 1917 have had similar success by doing limited releases in December and then expanding to more theaters at the start of the new year. So there can definitely be success with good films during this time that sort of sneak in and get called January releases, but really aren't. With a similar approach, franchise films have found success early in the year as well. Bad Boys for Life, for example, came out in January of 2020 and performed decently at the box office, earning $62 million in its first 3 days. It did receive pretty mixed reviews, but a lot of the fans of the franchise seem to enjoy it. Other films like this include Kung Fu Panda 3, Taken 3, and Scream from 2022. All of these might not be great films or even good to people who don't like these franchises, but they no doubt had success in the box office and with their fans. The best January successes, in my opinion, though, are the films that completely stand on their own without a limited release first and no franchise behind them. One of my all-time favorite films released on January 18th of 2008. It not only surprised the general audiences, but the critics as well. Cloverfield received solid reviews across the board, made about $40 million opening weekend, and sparked curiosity from audiences all over. It took an unconventional route by being pretty secretive up until its release, had a relatively unknown cast, and an odd title. That all seemed to work in its favor though. It built quite the following, which eventually led to a second movie and a third one that we don't really talk about. It currently ranks 6th on the list of highest grossing January releases. Some other notable films that stand on their own are Taken, which the first film received pretty positive reviews, Split, that did have a tiny release at a film festival prior, but didn't hit the masses until January, and Paddington, that warmed everyone's heart and received great praise. Most recently, in 2023, we got a great surprise with the release of Megan, a film that on the surface seemed pretty silly, but after releasing proved that it was a really entertaining and fun film. It didn't take itself too seriously and knew exactly what it was. Critics and audiences for the most part really enjoyed it, and it had a better than expected opening weekend at the box office by making $30.2 million. These are just some of the movies that prove there can be good releases early on in the year. Even though we do get a lot of bad releases in the first couple months of each new year, there are definitely cases where good and sometimes even great movies break through. It's also a time when studios can really take advantage of all the bad movies coming out and do wider releases on films that were in limited theaters prior, but are actually good and worth seeing. Franchise films usually have a lot of success around this time as well. So what are your favorite January release movies? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to drop a like and consider subscribing. I'm super excited to see what 2024 has in stores, and I'll have plenty of new videos on the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.